Mary's words clung to me like smoke as I drove home that night. He left us with debts, with impossible expectations. I couldn't shake the way she said it, not triumphant, not manipulative, but almost desperate. Was she telling the truth? Or was debts just the excuse she clung to, the bait Eldridge dangled to lure her deeper? Either way, I needed proof. The next morning, I went back to Father's study. Not the estate study, where Mary sat like a queen at her throne, but the smaller one in his old downtown office. He'd kept it modest even after his businesses flourished, a cramped, book-lined room above a row of hardware stores. The key still fit the lock. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and cedar. His desk was where it had always been, its surface worn smooth by years of use. If debts existed, I knew they wouldn't be in the glossy folders Mary paraded around. They'd be here, in the margins of his handwritten notes. I pulled out ledgers, receipts, correspondence. Hours slipped by as I pored over them, scanning every line of numbers until my eyes blurred. Yes, there were loans, but they weren't reckless. Father had leveraged land for expansions, short-term credit for equipment. He'd always paid them off methodically. But then, buried in a ledger from 2 years ago, I found something odd. A line of payment entries marked only with the initials F. Each month, a sizable withdrawal. No explanation. No invoice attached. Just a gone. My chest tightened. EF. Eldridge Financial. It wasn't Father's handwriting, though. The entries were neater, sharper. Precise. Mary's. I flipped back through the ledger, tracing her script. She'd been helping with bookkeeping in his final years, easing his workload as his health declined. And in that time, she'd begun funneling money toward Eldridge. The debts weren't Father's. They were hers. I sat back stunned. All this time, Mary had painted a picture of Father leaving us in financial ruin. But the truth was harsher. She had created the ruin, siphoning funds into Eldridge's pocket long before Father died. And now she was blaming him for her choices. My pulse pounded as I gathered the ledger and slipped it into my bag. Evidence. Proof. The kind that could shatter her story if it ever saw daylight. But as I closed the office door behind me, I felt the weight of another realization. Mary wasn't just desperate. She was compromised. Eldridge had their claws in her long before Father's will was even read. And if I exposed her too quickly, I risked more than embarrassment for her. I risked drawing Eldridge's full attention to myself. That night, I sat with Daniel at a quiet cafe and slid the ledger across the table. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the pages, his brow furrowing deeper with every line. "This isn't debt," he said finally. "This is laundering. She's been feeding Eldridge a steady stream of payments under the guise of bookkeeping. And if these initials are what I think they are..." He tapped the EF entries. "Then Mary isn't just in debt to them. She's in partnership with them." The words hit me like a cold wind. Partnership. No wonder the man in the gray suit had walked those halls with such confidence. This wasn't about a loan anymore. It was about ownership. I stared out the window, the city lights blurring in my vision. Father had prepared his will to protect me, to protect the estate from exactly this kind of betrayal. But Mary had already cracked the door wide open. And Eldridge wasn't going to walk away now that they'd had a taste. One thing was clear. If I wanted to save Father's legacy, I couldn't just fight Mary. I had to be ready to fight Eldridge head-on. And for that, I needed to be smarter, faster, and far more careful than I'd ever been in my life. Because from here on, every move I made, they'd be watching. 3 days passed before the next blow landed. It came not with whispers in the halls or furtive glances from the staff, but in the form of a manila envelope taped to my front door. When I tore it open, my hands shook as I scanned the thick packet inside. Legal documents. Filed in court. Eldridge Financial Group v. The Whitmore Estate. My blood went cold. The claim was bold, ruthless. Eldridge was suing to enforce binding financial agreements made by Mary on behalf of the estate. They claimed rights to liens on the land, repayment of inflated loans, and most chillingly, the option to acquire equity in estate assets. Equity. Ownership. They weren't circling anymore. They were attacking. I drove straight to Daniel's office. the papers clutched like a lifeline. He read them with that lawyer's grim focus, muttering under his breath as he flipped through each page. Finally, he looked up. "This is bad. Very bad. Tell me something I don't know," I said, my throat tight. He leaned back in his chair. "These contracts, if the court accepts them as valid, Aldridge could carve up the estate piece by piece. Land, assets, trusts, even mineral rights if there are any. And Mary's signature is on all of it." My stomach lurched. But she didn't have the authority. The estate isn't hers to sign away. Daniel nodded. "True. But Aldridge will argue she acted as an executor, or with tacit approval. They'll drag it out, and every day they stall, they tighten the noose." I buried my face in my hands. For a moment, the fight felt hopeless. But then I remembered the ledger. The proof. The neat little entries in Mary's hand, month after month, feeding Aldridge's appetite. I pulled it from my bag and slid it across his desk. "They want to drag us into court? Fine. Then we drag them into the light." Daniel adjusted his glasses, scanning the pages. His eyes widened. "Esther, this is gold. Not only does it undermine their claim, it flips the story entirely. If we show this, it looks like collusion. Mary wasn't protecting the estate. She was siphoning money to them. Which means Aldridge wasn't a lender. They were a partner," I finished. "Exactly." For the first time in weeks, hope stirred in my chest. But Daniel's face darkened as he closed the ledger. "We have to be careful. If we rush this into court, Aldridge will fight back hard. They'll bury us in motions, smear you in the press, maybe even threaten you directly. And Mary." He paused, choosing his words. "If she realizes you have this ledger, she'll do everything she can to destroy it. And you." I swallowed hard. He was right. The ledger wasn't just a weapon. It was a target. That night, I tucked it into a lockbox and slid it beneath the floorboards of my bedroom. My father's words echoed in my mind. Integrity is the only wealth that endures. Protect it, even when others sell it cheap. I couldn't expose the ledger yet, not until the moment would deal the sharpest blow. But waiting meant walking a razor's edge. Because every day Aldridge grew bolder, filing claims, flexing muscle. And every day Mary fell deeper into their hands. The phone rang the next morning. Mary's voice clipped and cold. "I heard you've been digging into Father's papers. You need to stop, Esther. For your own good. For my own good." The words lingered after she hung up, chilling me more than any legal threat. Because for the first time, it didn't sound like my sister speaking. It sounded like Aldridge, using her mouth as a mask. I set the phone down, my hands trembling. This fight wasn't about money anymore. It was about survival. The first time I noticed the car, I told myself it was nothing. A black sedan, idling across the street as I left the grocery store. Windows tinted too dark for me to see the driver. Plenty of people drove black sedans. I wasn't paranoid. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. But the second time, there was no denying it. I had just pulled out of Daniel's office after another long strategy session, the ledger tucked safely back in its hiding place at home. My rearview mirror caught the same sedan pulling out behind me. At first, I thought it was coincidence. I made a right turn. So did they. I emerged onto the highway. So did they. By the time I took the exit for my neighborhood, my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I slowed in front of my driveway. The sedan rolled past, slowly, deliberately, before disappearing down the road. My skin prickled with cold dread. I wasn't imagining it. They were watching me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house set me on edge. I checked the locks twice, then 3 times. I caught myself staring out the windows, scanning for headlights in the dark. Father's voice echoed in my mind. A threat ignored is a threat invited. Aldridge wasn't just threatening me in court. They were reminding me they could reach me anywhere. The next morning, Daniel didn't look surprised when I told him. He leaned back in his chair, his mouth a grim line. It was only a matter of time. They're trying to rattle you, make you second-guess every step. Well, it's working, I admitted, my voice cracking. How am I supposed to fight them when I can't even drive home without looking over my shoulder? Daniel's tone softened. By remembering what they fear most. You. That ledger. If they're watching you, it's because they know you have something that can burn them. His words gave me a flicker of strength, but fear still sat heavy in my chest. Later that week, as I left the estate after yet another frosty confrontation with Mother, I spotted the sedan again. This time it wasn't subtle. It was parked just beyond the gates, angled so the driver had a perfect view of the driveway. Something inside me snapped. I pulled over, got out, and walked straight toward the car, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. The tinted window rolled down. A man in a gray suit sat behind the wheel, the same cologne I'd smelled in the study clinging to the air between us. He smiled faintly, like he'd been waiting for me. "Miss Whitmore," he said smoothly. "Lovely evening." My stomach flipped. "Who are you?" "Someone who appreciates efficiency," he replied. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. We'd prefer cooperation over conflict." His words were calm, almost polite, but his eyes were sharp, assessing, the way a predator studies its prey. I forced my voice steady. "If you think intimidation is going to scare me into handing over my father's legacy, you don't know me at all." His smile widened. "We know you very well, Esther. Better than you realize." And then, as casually as if we'd just exchanged pleasantries at a dinner party, he rolled the window up and drove away. I stood frozen on the roadside, my pulse racing. "We know you very well." The way he said it, it wasn't a bluff. They were digging into me, into my life. How much did they know? The ledger? Daniel? My hiding place? The thought made my knees weak. That night, I checked the lockbox again, reassuring myself the ledger was still there, untouched. But for the first time, a terrifying thought settled in my mind. What if Aldridge already had someone inside the house? Watching, listening, waiting. The shadows weren't just outside anymore. They were closing in. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every tick of the clock sounded like a warning. Every groan of the old floorboards made me wonder if someone else was in the house with me. By morning, one thought consumed me. If Aldridge knew so much already, someone close to me had to be feeding them information. The question was who? The estate was alive with its usual rhythm when I arrived later that day. Staff moving briskly, gardeners trimming the hedges, the kitchen clattering with breakfast preparations. But instead of comfort, the bustle unsettled me. These were the people who'd served my family for years, who'd known me since I was a child. And yet now, every smile looked forced, every glance too quick to turn away. Had one of them sold us out? I decided to test it. At lunch, I made a casual show of sitting in the solarium with a stack of old books, deliberately whispering into my phone as if leaving a message. "Daniel," I said clearly enough to carry, "I'll be bringing Father's ledger tomorrow morning. You'll have it in your office by 10. Of course, the ledger was still tucked safely beneath my floorboards. This was bait, and I didn't have to wait long for a bite. That evening, the gray sedan appeared again, this time parked half a block from Daniel's office. My stomach dropped. They knew, which meant someone inside the estate had repeated my words almost instantly. The realization was like a knife twisting in my gut. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. The walls of the estate had ears, and those ears belonged to Aldridge. The next morning, I confronted Mother. She was in her sitting room, perfectly composed as always, sipping tea as if our world weren't crumbling around us. "Someone here is feeding Aldridge information," I said, my voice shaking with anger. They knew I was bringing the ledger to Daniel before I even left this house. Her eyes flicked up at me, cool and dismissive. "You really think I would stoop to spying on you, Esther? I think you've made it clear where your loyalties lie," I snapped. Her lips curved in that infuriating half-smile. "If Aldridge knows your every move, perhaps it's because you're so predictable. You underestimate them. You always have." The way she said it chilled me, almost as if she wanted me to know I was outmatched. But as I turned to leave, I caught something in her expression, a flicker of something she quickly masked. Fear. For all her icy composure, she wasn't in control of Aldridge. She was afraid of them too. Later that night, I decided to go lower, below the family, below the ones who pretended at power. I found Clara, the oldest housemaid, alone in the laundry room. She'd been with us for nearly 30 years, her loyalty unshaken through every storm. Clara, I whispered, please. Someone here is talking to Eldridge. Do you know who? Her hands froze mid-fold. She glanced at the door, then back at me. Her voice dropped to a tremor. Miss Esther, don't ask me that. Don't. It's not safe. The way she said it told me everything. She knew, but she was too afraid to say. As I walked back through the silent halls, my chest tight with dread, one truth became undeniable. Betrayal wasn't a distant possibility. It was already here, inside the estate, close enough to whisper through the walls. That night, lying awake in the dark, I realized something even worse. If they had someone inside, then the ledger wasn't as safe as I believed. And if Eldridge ever got their hands on it, this fight would be over before it even began. Once the idea lodged in my mind, I couldn't shake it. If I wanted to know who was betraying me, I couldn't wait for Clara or anyone else to confirm it. I had to prove it myself. So I devised a plan. The next morning, I walked into the study where two of the staff were dusting the shelves, speaking loud enough for both of them to hear. I'll be taking Father's safe deposit box key to the bank tomorrow, I announced casually. Daniel says what's inside could change everything. It wasn't true. There was no key. No box. Just another lure. But I made sure the words lingered in the air long enough for them to stick. Then I waited. That night, as I drove home from Daniel's office, my phone buzzed. It was him. The man from the gray sedan. Miss Whitmore, he said smoothly, we'd be very interested in anything you retrieve from that safe deposit box tomorrow. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement. My chest tightened. The trap had worked. But the speed of the response told me something worse. The leak wasn't just casual gossip. It was immediate. Real-time. Someone in the estate was passing my words directly to Eldridge. The next morning, I narrowed the suspects. Only a handful of staff had been in the room when I staged my little performance. But who among them would dare cross me like that? I decided to stage one more test. This time I enlisted Daniel. We met in his office, blinds drawn tight, and I laid out the plan. I'll tell the staff I'm handing over the ledger to you tomorrow, I said. But in reality, you'll be nowhere near the estate. If they move against us, we'll know. Daniel frowned. It's risky. You'll be painting a target squarely on yourself. I already am the target, I said flatly. At least this way, we control the board. The next day, I let the rumor slip again, this time making a show of tucking a leather-bound book into my bag before leaving the estate. But I didn't go to Daniel. Instead, I parked in a quiet lot near the outskirts of town and waited. At first, nothing. Just the steady tick of the dashboard clock. Then, just as doubt began to creep in, a shadow moved across my rearview mirror. The gray sedan. It rolled in behind me, slow and deliberate, boxing me in. The driver's window lowered, and my heart stopped. It wasn't the gray-suited man this time. It was Mary. Her expression was cool, triumphant. Really, Esther, she said through the open window, did you think you could outsmart us? The words hit me like a physical blow. Us. Not me. Not them. Us. She wasn't just a pawn in Eldridge's game. She was part of it. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. You've been feeding them everything. You my own sister. She tilted her head, lips curling into a smirk. Don't be so dramatic. I'm securing the future Father should have left me, not you. Eldridge understands power. They reward loyalty. Something you've never had the sense to offer. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. All this time, I had feared the staff, suspected Mother, even questioned Daniel. But it was Mary. My own blood. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. You're out of your depth, Esther. If you were smart, you'd hand over that ledger and walk away. Otherwise, she let the threat hang in the air, her eyes glinting with something colder than hatred. Otherwise, you won't just lose the estate. You'll lose everything. Then she rolled the window up, the sedan pulling away into the shadows, leaving me trembling in the driver's seat. I had my answer. The traitor wasn't a servant. It wasn't just Mother. It was Mary, my sister, working hand in hand with the very people Father had warned us about. And she wasn't afraid to destroy me to keep it that way.